previously met in closed session under exception C1 and C2. I'd like to call back to order the special meeting for August 1st, 2023. If I can have a roll.
Fred. Ms. Gonzalez. Mr. Riddle.
Yes.
Ms. Hannah. Ms. Fabian. Ms. Lensing.
Yes.
President Ewing.
Yes, so we have a quorum. Motion to go back into open session.
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Riddle.
Second.
Second by Ms. Fabian. All in favor signify with aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, we are now in open session. Mr. Luosa, if you be so kind as to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Justice for all.
All right, if we have our public comment sheet. While we get that, just a reminder that this is a special meeting. We had a safety presentation that we wanted to get through last week, but due to time and our board agreements, it was requested that we have a special meeting before our finance committee meeting. So first name on the list is Pat Vukovic. Ms. Vukovic, your time will begin whenever you start speaking.
Thank you. Is this on?
Can't really hear you. Try one more time.
Hello? Yes? Okay. All right. At last week's board meeting, there was a lengthy discussion regarding expectations between board members and the superintendent. The main concerns that arose for me from this conversation were, number one, the lengthy school board meetings and the amount of time district staff has to stay for those meetings. Mr. Ewing stated that many districts have only one meeting a month. And my second concern, the 30-minute rule, essentially stating that if the request from a board member for documentation will take more than 30 minutes for staff to put together, there must be a majority consensus of the board or the superintendent discretion in order to honor that school board member's question. And I'd like to give what I is concerned about and then a solution, because that's what you're asking for often. The Student Achievement and Operations Committee meetings are often very disorganized. Solution: department heads, managers, directors giving reports or asking the board to spend taxpayer dollars on a particular program should be at that meeting to answer the board's questions. Multiple times we hear board members asking for detailed data about a program's efficacy before voting on it. Yet years have gone by and still a very general report is given at the podium. Board members have questions. That adds more time to the committee meeting and more time to the regular board meeting the following week. Just remember the controversy and long discussions about renewing BAM, WOW, paper, SROs, and Hey Tutor. I checked the 2023 salaries of the superintendent and her cabinet members today, and all but one of them makes over $150,000. And the superintendent makes over $300,000 plus. At these salaries, I would expect that I would work long hours. As my dad always said, you work until the job is done. Our 26-year-old daughter is an attorney, also makes a salary, but works for up to 12 plus hours a day and often goes on into the weekends to prepare for the next week's court calls. In regard to Mr. Ewing's statement that many school boards only meet once a month, I researched the large districts size of Waukegan, and most of those districts meet 2 to 3 times a month. The 30-minute time limit. Solution: demand more from your only 2 employees. Please recall my previous statement about top staff salaries and working until the job is done. In my 29 years as a teacher, I was required to write detailed lesson plans every week. It's part of the job. Imagine if I told my boss, well, if it takes more than 30 minutes to write my plans, I'm not doing them. What do you think would happen? Write me up or give me a subordination, charge me with subordination, or worse? Ask any teacher and he or she will say it's impossible to complete lesson plans in 30 minutes. Last week, this is exactly what you heard from your boss, her boss, from your one of your only employees. the superintendent. Why are you accepting this from a person who makes $318,746 in benefits?
Ms. Vukovic.
Find the time to get the work done,
Thank you,
please.
Ms. Vukovic. Ray Vukovic.
Good evening. You don't want the meetings to go on, but if the people responsible for things would get the work done, we wouldn't be here. Case in point, brought this up last week about a FOIA that I had submitted on the 26th of May. Today is now the 1st of August. And the law says within 5 business days, and there's a 5-day extension. And I'd received from the FOIA officer a request for the extension, and that I would have it on June the 19th. I emailed the board president and the general counsel in early July, and the counsel indicated she was on vacation and would take care of it as soon as she got back. I brought it up last week, and she sat right there 7 nights ago and nodded her head. There's nothing yet. Nothing. Now, that's the one. Now, are you trying to hide something or cover something? This is executive session minutes. You all approved them. She should have that done. The second piece is a FOIA that was submitted after that on July the 11th. 5 days later would be the 18th. There was a request on the 19th for a 5-day extension. Well, now we're 5 days late on that one. Now, interestingly enough, that's something I brought to this board that if I ever get the information, you can use, because you should be looking at revamping your legal department. I've asked for the cost of all the employees and benefits associated with that department, as well as the cost of outside legal counsel. If you had a firm that you had, like you used to in the old days, you had a firm, and if they got behind, they'd put more associates on from the firm to get the job done. But here, I wouldn't be standing up here today talking about FOIAs once again, yet here we go, wait and wait and wait. Either you need more help there, you need different people doing it, or somebody's covering something up. So, you know, you have 2 employees. I bring that up repeatedly. You need to get them to get the information that I am legally entitled to. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Vukovic. And I see 2 names that are together, so you each get 3 minutes, or did you guys want to take and combine your 3 minutes? That's Natoya Franklin and I believe is it Leslie Brown? Becerra. Okay. Your time will begin whenever you start talking, Ms. Becerra and Ms. Franklin.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
So together, Leslie and I make up the Melanated Authors. We are passionate about exposing students to multicultural literature and culturally responsive strategies that affect children of color. According to the National Assessment of Educational Progress, 85% of our Black children lack proficiency in reading skills. In addition to that startling statistic, we have seen the disconnect in Black students when it comes to reading, writing, and literacy. And we understand how important it is for our students of color to see themselves in books.
Yes. Our goal is to continue to provide resources, strategies, and support to build strong readers and leaders. We have visited 11 out of the 15 elementary schools in our school district and 2 surrounding school districts outside of Waukegan, sharing our books, strategies, and workshops. As a result, we have seen families and students become more excited about literacy, and we look forward to having your support as we move forward with our future endeavors. And we have brought several copies of the books that we have personally authored.
We have Mason and his superpower. It takes grit to be fit.
Love is a sacrifice, and fitness is my superpower.
We also have Miguel and his Miracle Kick, which is
in English and Spanish. So we're super excited about what we have done in Waukegan, and we look forward to future partnerships with you all in other school districts surrounding.
Thank you, Ms. Bracero, Ms. Franklin. Next name is Rayon Edwards.
Good evening. I went back and I continued to watch the meeting, and you know, I'm kind of confused with how things are done with this district. As I also do research and I look at other districts, this Board of Education is responsible for 2 employees. The size of district we is, the type of money we have, the disorganization is disgusting. And everybody is watching us, y'all. We got a gentleman that come up here every meeting. He's asking for FOIAs that he's already submitted. We are now having a superintendent almost dictate how board members can enter into schools and do things that we, the people, the stakeholders, the community, elected to speak on our behalf. And if we doing what we supposed to do, then them going in those buildings when they want to shouldn't be a concern. I've watched y'all for the last 3-4 years. I'm watching titles being removed and made different. I'm hearing from other employees that have applied for these positions and being overlooked, and they're being given to people that's connected to other people. It may not be illegal to do some of the things that you're doing, but it is unethical. And if it's unethical and you can do something unethical, you can do something illegal. I'm disappointed in my elected officials because last board meeting I watched a group of Asian teachers come here. And we all know what's going on. We all know what happened, and we all know why they was here. But I didn't leave. I went downstairs and I stood downstairs until all of them exited, because I wanted to have a conversation with them myself personally and understand why did they come. And I explained to them the comments that was made. And sometimes things come out and they sound one way, but we know what they meant. It's a problem. I've been on my social media asking, we're talking about the black and the brown community working together. Well, the brown people have a privilege that the black people don't. They get to understand our language, but we don't get to understand theirs. I've been begging COC, cities, I've been asking everybody, send me some brown people that want to volunteer and do some Spanish classes. And right now I got 67 black folk that want to learn the brown language. We won't have no relationship if we don't know how to communicate. And that's even with the Asian community, y'all.
Thank you, Mr. Edwards. Final name on the list is Sandra Haney.
My name is Sandra Haney. I guess my time starts now.
Yeah, whenever you start.
Haney.
Can we restart, please? Sorry, Ms.
Okay.
Haney. And then if you can just talk in the microphone, please.
Oh, okay.
All right.
All right. So my name is Sandra Haney. I'm a clinician here in Waukegan. I'm a taxpayer as well. I was actually called to action by this gentleman here, and I was like, I'll come to the school board meeting. But being a taxpayer, living in Waukegan, paying taxes to both North Chicago and Waukegan because of where I live, I understand the importance of it. I've worked more than 20 years for the county of Lake in different capacities. I'm a clinical social worker. I give back to my community however it may be, but I'm just hearing a lot of different things that maybe not only the gentleman calling me to action as a taxpayer and as a person that resides in Lake County. I've been in different roles or worked on community projects with some of you that are even on the board, but I really thought I was signing up just to say I was here, but now I know. But you should anticipate that you should see me, and I too will make it a point to call my community to action as well. So thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Haney. We appreciate those who came out and for your comments and remarks. As we get the agenda back on, there's one item, and this is in preparation to us getting started with school. That is our safety presentation. Before immediately following this meeting, we will go into our final finance committee meeting. The safety presentation is there. If we can get it pulled up, Mr. White. And then, as a reminder, I am going to ask board members as they go through the presentation to please write down your comments or questions, and we will. Yeah. Question, Ms. Lindsay?
I would just like to reiterate my request, because it is segmented into different groups, if we could just note where our questions are, so as people are answering our questions at the end of the presentation, it's organized so we can ask all our questions to Mr. Wilson, and then it transfers over to the MTSS team, etc.
Thank you. All right. Go ahead, Superintendent.
Good evening, stakeholders of Waukegan Public School District. Tonight we will be presenting on our safety plan to open up schools. As we know, the beginning of the year is always an exciting time for our staff, for our families, and for our community in general. And as an educator, everybody brings a different perspective. Teachers are excited about getting in their rooms, getting set up. The curriculum principals are excited about professional developments and how their buildings look. But for our parents, it's all of that. And the biggest question for our parents is my child going to be safe? And what does safety look like in Waukegan Public Schools? So tonight we have created a presentation surrounding both divisions, academics and operations. So you're going to see a lot of different people chiming in at different points to explain their roles and responsibilities and what they have put in place to ensure that our schools are safe as we open them up for the Waukegan community. And at this time, I'm going to ask my team to come up, please. I would think that it's best that we're all here or sitting around here so that we don't have to wait for you all to walk up to the podium. And this can flow smoothly because we do have a budget meeting. And we also know that safety is so important. In this past year of 2023, and I was just looking at some research in Education Week, there was 23 school shootings. That is 23 too many shootings in schools. That should be a very sacred, secure place. So at this time, I'm going to turn it over to our director. Am I correct? You're going first, Daryl? To our Director of Safety and Security, Daryl Wilson. The presentation will cover security enhancements within our district, proactive initiatives, school-based strategies, MTSS and SEL supports, social emotional learning, that's what SEL, safety-related trainings for all staff, teachers, paras, security, etc. Safety drills to ensure that our schools are safe in case an incident happened. And how do we back this all up with policy and practice at the district level, but especially from the board's view, because the board does dictate policy. So, Mr. Wilson, at this time I will turn the microphone over to you.
Thank you. Good evening, board president, board members, superintendent, colleagues, and community.
Mr. Wilson, I'm just going to ask that everyone speak in the mic because we may not have an audience here, but I'm sure our families are going to want to go back and see how we're preparing for the beginning of the school year. So thank you.
Mm-hmm. Some of the recent security enhancements are new camera systems, building vulnerability assessments, those enhancements that we'll go over, open gate metal detectors. Next slide. This year we're going to do installations on 7 buildings. New buildings will get interior and exterior cameras. This is mainly done to reduce the vandalism at some of our remote schools and increase the overall security of the district, of those buildings. After the completion of this installation, all of our buildings will have cameras. Robbie Lightfoot will get an upgrade in the future of interior cameras. throughout the year, we've done several safety observations. We brought in the consultant, and they went around and observed our safety practices. Last fall, we did all 3 high schools. This spring, we had them come in and do the middle schools. The elementary schools will be coming this fall. We'll do them. The photo here you see is McCall, and what we've done at several of our buildings is we've created secure vestibules. And we've created these secure vestibules so that no one has direct access to the building when they come in. There's a little foyer, so they're waiting. It helps keep our safety, keep our kids safe and visitors safe. It's a part of the new initiative that's going around the country, crime prevention through environmental design. And we've upgraded 6 of these buildings. Hyde Park will be the next one to be upgraded. Open gate metal detectors. We're going to use those for mostly outdoor events. The open gate metal detectors allow a large volume of crowds to come through quickly and safely. When not in use, they're portable, they weigh only 24 pounds. We'll move them to different venues, middle schools when we're doing random security checks at our middle schools. We'll probably use them if we host the sectionals when we have large volumes of traffic. The IGA is currently awaiting the City Council approval, but if approved, we'll have 2 SROs, one at each high school, and a roaming SRO for the middle schools. We also will be doing gang awareness training. Module 1 is due to roll out at the beginning of the school year, so online training. And then Module 2 will be a collaboration with the Waukegan Police Department, my staff, Miss London. We're going to make a video going over local gangs around the city. Consultant. We had been working closely with R.J. Harris and Associates. They've conducted several of the observations that I spoke about in the previous slide. They're advising on security matters, staffing. They're putting together scenarios for tabletop scenarios so we can present leadership and go over principles for different scenarios. Additional security enhancements. We created 2 doors, one at Washington campus and one at Brookside campus. And those are extra hour activity doors. And those doors are to provide safety, so we only have visitors coming through one door during after hours. We have a metal detector and x-ray machine at both of those doors. Safety officer schedules, we realign the schedules. I've asked for additional safety officers at both high schools so I can supplement the cafeteria. And by doing this, it would allow more safety officers on the floor during those times, 8th and 9th period. Proactive initiatives. Ms. London.
I know, so small. Good evening, guys, Superintendent, Board President, Board members, colleagues, and community members. So I'm going to go over some ongoing proactive initiatives.
Ms. London, when everyone comes up, if you can just give your name and title in case our parents have questions and want to email you on a specific item or has a question. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Sorry about that. I'm Tasha London. I am the coordinator of crisis intervention and social emotional learning. Okay, so first we're going to start with ongoing. So if it has an asterisk I'll talk about that a little bit more. So our behavior threat assessment team, it's a district level threat assessment team, and it's for threats for students, staff, and district level individuals. So it's for everyone in our district. Crisis Go, it's a district level tool that we use to communicate for all kinds of crises in the district. Bullying prevention education is a district-wide prevention. It's taught through PBIS and MTSS. FACE Law is a new mandate as of July 1st, 2023, and it is to educate students, staff, families on grooming and sexual abuse, okay? And then our Crisis Go kits, these are our Crisis Go bags that are in every classroom and every office, and it allows for us to be prepared in case there's a crisis within the district or within that building. Training on de-escalation and physical restraints, that's a district initiative coming out, and that is coming out through our Zero Tolerance work group. Next slide. Thank you. So our district mental health response team, that is my team, and it consists of social workers, psychs, and counselors. And what we do is we provide services and supports to Waukegan students, parents, staff, and stakeholders affected by a crisis. Okay. Gaggle. That's one of our safety systems designed to identify, detect security or social emotional behavior through technology keywords and messages. Okay. Tip line, it's a platform for students, parents, guardians, staff, and community members to leave tips about the safety and welfare of students and school community. This can be left with your private information or you can leave it anonymously. Next, that's you.
Josue Cuevas, Associate Superintendent of the Information Technology Department. Good evening, Board President, Superintendent, community members. In addition of the physical security, the district, we take very seriously the cybersecurity for all of our staff and students. Some of the ongoing initiatives that we have the Know Before training platform where all staff have received training, and also we have conducted phishing campaign to measure how effective is this training. Also, we're going to extend this training to our high school students in the near future as well. We continue doing monthly updates to all systems and also to our network infrastructure. We also have a distributed denial of services, that's DDoS attacks through AT&T in the case that we get a major cyber attack, so we can be protected by that. We also have the latest and greatest firewalls with Palo Alto, and basically these protect and monitor all the data that go through our network infrastructure. And also we have completed the Wi-Fi heat map to identify the dead zones that we have in the district, and this will help us not only to improve the Wi-Fi connectivity, but also to improve the coverage for the Wi-Fi calling in the case of an emergency.
Good evening, Superintendent, President, members of our school board, community, and colleagues. My name is Amanda Patty. I'm one of the area superintendents. I'm also with Mr. Clarence Berry, who will introduce himself in a moment. Some of the school-based strategies that we are ensuring that all staff receive during the upcoming August Institute Days are refreshers on topics that support the importance of developing strong student relationships starting in the classroom, making sure that teachers know that they have the opportunity to take those first few days of instruction and build those opportunities within their school classroom settings, their classroom environments, to build that rapport and those classroom routines and procedures. Making sure that teachers and staff coming back from summer vacation are aware of some of the things that have happened within our community and how that will impact how students may present themselves during classroom. Making sure we have a heavy emphasis on our Tier 1 SEL curriculum, as well as PBIS, to make sure that students are receiving those positive reinforcements and being taught specific positive behaviors and expectations.
Good afternoon, Superintendent, Board, and community members. I'm Mr. Clarence Berry, Area 1 Superintendent. I want to speak specifically to the middle school strategies, some of the things that we're doing to make sure that we're in alignment for all 5 middle schools. On August the 8th, we'll be having a moving up to 6th grade orientation where families and students will be coming in to learn school-wide expectation as they're transitioning from 5th grade to 6th grade, so that we can set those expectations and make it clear. and we're all doing it on the same day so that everyone can get that same experience. We're also inviting parents to come out and be a part of that. And for the ones that can't come, we've asked Ms. Williams to provide bus transportation so that every sixth grader can come in the day before school starts, get to walk the building, open lockers, and get that personal experience. We're also having parent forums early in August this year so we can continue to go over those expectations and procedures for our returning students as well. One of the parts of middle school redesign is giving students a sense of belonging. And so this year we're going to be asking staff and principals to do some personal notes and welcome students back, looking at advisory and homeroom so that they can make those early connections. Also, we are making sure that we're building in our advisory some time stamps so that students are building those connection and mentorship, and we'll be doing that through the second step SEL platform in middle school this year. We're moving it up from elementary to middle school.
Some of the next steps I'd like to explain are specific to the high school campuses. And so when we looked at the data from our past year in terms of where we were seeing the most need for some revisions, we knew that the hallways were an area that we typically had crowd-related behaviors that also occurred in our lunchrooms. And so what we have done is we have redone our staffing to support supervision in specific hallways by different team members. We have redone our duty schedule to make sure that we have adequate coverage in different hallways throughout the course of the day, as well as the lunchrooms. Those were some areas that we knew needed to be revamped, and we have restaffed and realigned our schedules, both administrative coverage, safety, and teacher duty schedules, to make sure we have enough people in those areas at different points of the day. One of the big pieces that we also looked at was making sure there was clear plans for support for teachers to be able to manage behaviors and provide interventions within the classroom, but knowing that at some point in time, either through repeated behaviors or certain types of infractions that maybe were more egregious, making sure that everyone knew that this was the process of how to handle a classroom managed behavior versus how an office administrator may respond to that behavior. So we have some in-depth training for our staff coming up next week during Institute Day to really make sure that classroom procedures, classroom level interventions are first and foremost, because we want students to remain in class. We don't want them to have to be sent to the office. We want to have that opportunity in the classroom to resolve the issue at the lowest level, to continue that teacher-student relationship. But in the event we do have to escalate a situation, wanted to make sure that we are consistently responding to that issue. And so we are making sure that we have clear pathways and training support so teachers know what to expect, administrators know that they are being consistent, and that we are spelling that out from the get-go. So there's no gray in terms of how can I support students in my classroom, and how can the administration also support student behavior through progressive discipline. Next slide. We have done a lot of work this summer to help set the expectations and create a positive atmosphere. We have PBIS events calendared and incentives calendared, so students will know when they can redeem their opportunities for positive incentives. We're going to make sure that parents know that as well, so that parents are in the loop around those positive engagement opportunities. We've spent a lot of time networking with our middle school principals to make sure we know which students may be coming our way as new freshmen who may need some additional supports from the start of the year. And we wanted to make sure that we also are coming from the lens of fresh start, fresh school year, new opportunities. And so we spent a lot of time this summer doing personalized phone calls to students and to their families to find out what are the strengths of your student, what can we know about your student that will help us serve them better. And so with the culture climate team and the administration spent ample time this summer doing some positive phone calls to students that we knew may need some additional support from the onset of the year. We have been doing our 9th through 12th grade orientations. Freshman was last week, I believe, and starting tomorrow is our juniors and seniors orientations. So those will be great opportunities for kids to get into the buildings, make sure they have their IDs set, their PACE cards are all ready to go, and they have a welcome opportunity to become familiar with their new campus. We also, the Principal Ave, Mr. Hill, and Ms. Carter partnered with a variety of different local leaders, aldermen, the mayor's office, the police department, a variety of different local leaders. And we have a whole team coming from different local organizations coming to the first few days of school to welcome our students and establish those positive community relationships, and really encourage and develop a sense of belonging, as Mr. Barry had referred to really establish a positive community wraparound for our students.
Some of the mandatory student trainings that we're doing is not only with the students but with the staff as well as administration this week. We're doing the principal institution this week, and they're going over these same training, and they will be implemented with the staff as well. But on our first 2 weeks of school, we're going to be expecting all staff to set the PBIX matrix and expectation, making sure students know the behavior and the expectation as we're starting off this new school year. We'll also be teaching them how to deal with bullying, and if there is any concerns with bullying or harassment, how to report that. We'll be going in depth with all of the students about faith and Aaron's Law, which are required, and we will continue with our peer-to-peer conflicts through restorative practices such as peace circles, mediation, and resolving conflicts, and teaching them the skills and how to use all of these different strategies.
Good evening. My name is Jennifer Rice de la Sanchez, Director of Teaching and Learning, and as well as our MTSS department. And really I'm speaking to the lens of professional development for all of our staff, as well as continual MTSS team development around using student data to make behavioral and social, emotional, and developmental decisions for our students within this work. And so as far as the overview for MTSS, it's multi-tiered systems of support. And if you really think about MTSS, it's essentially a verb. It is the work that we do as teams within schools that know our students and that use the data of individualized students, whole group or small group students, to make decisions that meet their needs. Progress monitor those decisions and systems that we put into place in our school, and evaluate whether or not those are working and supporting our kids and what the outcome is that we want to improve and to enhance. And so this continually moves in cycles throughout this school. As far as what we're going to continue with our mental health and first aid trainings. This is as we presented last spring, this is a 3-year process to onboard and to continually develop 2,000 plus staff members. We're picking up last year, of which we worked within our institute days on our healing and helping, professional development, de-escalation strategies, and continuing supporting of our SEL counselors within our elementary building. We have our BAM and WOW mentoring initiatives and our mental health supports, right, and the grants that we have received, as well as a transition from AHS, or Asian Human Services, to Jocelyn. As far as our mental health first aid training being provided by Jocelyn, as well as our district leads, what we have done so far on our last Institute Day in April is we've trained 200 of our staff members, as we presented, as well as moving forward, as I had stated, across the next 2 years, this year included, on Institute Days, of onboarding 6 to 7 schools and continuing that work into our year 3, so that all 2,000 plus staff has received this. It is an ongoing process. It will not stop. And every time that we can fit in our need for this within School Improvement Wednesdays, as well as Institute Days, those are our opportunities. Thank you, Lee. This is our data as far as BAM WOW so far. I know that they have been up here speaking to our community of what their continual plan is to onboard more students, to use the MTSS process, the verb of the process, to meet the needs of our students. and really having that process to evaluate it, right? And that ongoing process. As far as our additional mental health supports, as stated, we have Jocelyn, we have our SEL counselors as within our first slide. We have our alternative youth, that's within our grant. It's a 2-year grant, it's for Juarez and for Lewis. We have clinicians at each of our buildings, and also trauma-informed specialists within that grant. For CYN, we have CYN, I believe that it is at Abbott. I know that it's at Washington campus, and that will continue with supports as well. So in really hearing our board and our community, we have multiple roles and responsibilities for the needs of our students, and these are additional SEL supports for our students on top of our district staff. Thank you.
We're now going to talk about safety-related trainings for the staff.
Hi guys, I'm back again. All right, so Alice is, we'll get into that a little bit more shortly. Crisis Go, that once again I spoke about that before. That is just a tool that we use to communicate during a crisis. It's an effective tool and I quite enjoy it. Verbal de-escalation, that is something we have decided through our zero tolerance group again. RTO, so I know the acronyms are a little weird, but that is physical restraint, timeout, and isolated timeout. We, in the district, we do physical restraints. We get trained through CPI and timeouts. We do not do isolated timeout because that is board policy, is prohibited in our district, okay? Bloodborne pathogens and gang awareness, gang awareness is a new initiative in the district, and then bloodborne pathogens, that is one of our annual mandated trainings for staff to take every year. Face law, once again, it's a new mandate focused on sexual abuse and grooming, and that is across the board, so staff will get trained, so will students, so will staff, so all staff, teachers. CPI, that is a behavior intervention that we actually use to train our staff members on physical restraints and timeout. DCFS is also another mandated, and that is for all school personnel. All school personnel must be trained in DCFS, mandated reporting, certified and non-certified staff. Administrative staff training. So this is NIM, so this is our command structure. So this is a command structure used by federal, state, and local agencies, and it's used to communicate efficiently during a crisis. So we use this structure in our district as well, just to ensure that we're communicating effectively, not only in our district, but with outside agencies like police and fire and things like that. So they all use this ICS command. So we have our administrative staff learn and get trained on these modules as well, so we're all prepared for it. Next. That's you.
Safety officer specific trainings. All of our safety officers go through CPI, as Ms. London said. We're also going through gang awareness, conflict resolution, conflict student to student, conflict staff to student. These are online trainings that they also go through. They go through bomb threat every year. We're going to continue what we did last year, which I'm excited about. It's the trauma sensitive training. It helps our safety staff understand how trauma affects students, the climate of the building, staff, and even themselves. Last year, the union presented. We'll do a refresher in January. We also had Dr. Michael Allen present last year. He presented on a book, Brotherly Love. If you haven't read it, it's an excellent book. We're going to pair with the equity department and do some training also. Next slide.
Hello, everybody. My name is Barry Schwartz. I am the manager of the Department of Equity and Inclusion for our district. We understand that for students to thrive at school, they must feel safe to be who they are. They must feel valued and feel a deep sense of belonging. And as a result, our leadership instruction assessment must foster psychological and emotional safety through emotional intelligence training and culturally responsive pedagogy, school environments, and a culturally responsive teaching and leading practices. This year, our entire district will receive training on culturally responsive teaching and leading practices. It is a 2-year rollout plan with leadership at the high school being trained this year, and all schools, grades pre-K through 8, their entire staff will be receiving culturally responsive teaching and leading practices that are directly aligned with the culturally responsive teaching and leading practices from ISB. We are also working with safety team to do training on emotional intelligence and how to be culturally responsive when dealing with students, families, and community. We're also working directly with our behavioral supports team to train on understanding culturally responsive behavioral intervention practices. So it's not just limited to understanding what the behavior is, but really what it comes down to, and really understanding behavior as a form of communication so that we can minimize the time of out-of-school suspensions and really understand to build those restorative practices within our schools. That's it for me. Thank you.
I'll take this slide. Alice. Alice is the law enforcement drill that we do every year. ALICE stands for Alert, Lockdown, Inform, Counter, Evacuate. And basically it helps prepare our students, staff, and teachers on how to deal with an active shooter incident. Okay. Safe Schools e-learning. I talked about some of the training that's on this. Sensitivity awareness, conflict management, safety basics, also the mandated reporter. We also use schools e-learning for this as well. Safety drills. The district is mandated to do several drills a year. And these drills are designed, again, to help prepare the students, staff, and administration on how to react to drills. We do 3 fire drills per year, 1 with the fire department. We do an active shooter drill with law enforcement. We do a shelter in place and bus evacuation drills.
Okay, bringing up the rear here, I'm Kathy Vanderbroek, General Counsel for the district. I'm going to take a few minutes to talk to you about some of the policy and practice reviews that were undertaken in the last year and are projected for the upcoming year. Oh, I can't read that from this distance. This is covering some of the policy and practice reviews that we did last year. One of the things that I want to highlight is, you know, as you read all of the policy titles, it's not necessarily that the entire policy addressed with the safety issue, but there was a safety component in the policy somehow. So for example, transportation contains information on what to do if you feel your child is living on a busy highway and there's not a bus route available for you. So we did broadly look at that. We also have, thank you, that will help. We have some policies listed that are pending. So the Code of Conduct and Ethical Responsibilities will be up for second reading at our next meeting. And we've gone through several of these in over the course of the last year, some from an equity perspective and some that were to do legal updates as well. And they will ultimately come back to you with an equity review if that hasn't been done yet. Next slide. More particular to practice reviews, the COVID pandemic team's been meeting every 6 months consistent with the ESSA grant requirements. We've looked at the employee background check procedures and character reviews and updated those given some changes in the rules. and just to improve our practices. We've looked at management of leave pending investigation, looking to get more consistency in how that is implemented, notifications on behavior expectations if there's a violation of our conduct policies associated with access to the buildings, as well as the zero tolerance work group, conversations that had taken place and looked at use of physical restraint, in particular in those discussions. And then this is where we're looking to go with some of our policy work this upcoming year. And these are just the pieces that, again, have a safety overlay. They're predictably will be policy work that needs to be done on top of that. But these are the ones with the safety overview. We do want to pull all of our policies related to uniform grievance complaint procedures and discrimination and harassment and look at those collectively and bring those forward as a series of recommended updates for the board during the course of the year, as well as taking the student policies on behaviors. And in those subsections, if you were to go to the board policies, looking at those numbered 6040 to 6048, those are really focusing in on some of the behavior policies, such as use of electronic devices in the schools, bringing the bullying back with an equity review. That should come forward. It's in its last stages, the discipline policy, the gang policy, tobacco use prohibition. So it's some of those direct student behavior policies that have safety implications to them. And taking those again as a series so that we have continuity in that equity review process, looking at multiple policies at once instead of one at a time, and then perhaps having to bring a policy back again because a change in a related policy came back. We're hoping this will speed up the process of the equity reviews, as well as give us some more sense of fluidity within the work groups and some of their feedback about looking at a single policy that they found sometimes difficult to manage the policy discussion because they felt there were several other policies that had an influence as well.
Thank you. I'm going to reiterate the superintendent's request that all the presenters come to the front of the room, as there may be questions that are posed that are relevant to your section. And so now we are at the question period. I appreciate the board for holding the questions to the end. And so if there are questions, just if you will raise your hand and we will go through those. Board members? Ms. Gonzalez, and then I see Ms. Fabian.
Do you want me to ask all of the questions at
Or
once?
I guess following Ms.
Call the
Lindsay's
person.
request is we're going to go to, each one was sectioned. So the first section
Security enhancements.
was, thank you for that. Make it easier. Security enhancements. So were there any questions related to security enhancements?
Yes.
Yes. Go ahead, Ms. Gonzalez, and then I see Ms. Lindsay.
So I had a question more as it relates to staffing. I know that we're building the vestibules, and I like that. But in terms of, I think of the high school and the two entrances or the one entrance to manage flow in between the building. Are we paying staff to stay additional hours every time that we have activities? And what happens, because I do recall it happening once, what happens when the school district receives a threat as activities are happening in the building after hours?
Yes, we are paying overtime for safety offers for activity after hours. When a threat is received, the administration, there's normally some administration there. If it's an athletic event, there's an athletic administrator there. They'll let me know, and then I'll make the appropriate calls and
You'll kind of be the point of contact?
Yes.
So those are your two. I didn't see your hand on this topic, Ms. Fabian, but I did see yours, Ms. Lindsay.
Yeah, I just want to preface that great presentation, a lot of work went into it, a lot of great information for our families went into it. My only ask as a critique is that when we're doing something like this on our broad district approach, we include some data to help the public understand why we are making these decisions and why this is our approach. In terms of security enhancements itself, I think a lot of our families are going to be excited about the security vegetables. I hope that our schools are going to warm them up, because there was a recent news article about SROs in buildings, and there was another superintendent that made a comment that we don't want our schools to look like prisons. So we just want to make sure that when they are entering, when community members and families are entering these vegetables, that they do feel warm and welcome, while also making sure that the school environment is safe. Mr. Wilson, for the open gate, can you just briefly overview, if those were to be triggered at an event, what would it look like? What can the rest of the community expect if someone else triggers that?
It'll be similar to what we do at the high school. We'll ask that person to step around the side and we'll wand them.
Okay.
Just to check to see.
Just to isolate and see, is it a
Yes.
belt buckle or is it a real threat?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, perfect. And then for the SROs, I love that their schedules are being realigned to cover the dismissal portion. Because they are still law enforcement officers, is their jurisdiction just related to school grounds or surrounding the school? Because we had an incident at the Washington campus where there was something going on at the Family Dollar parking lot. Would the SROs be clear to go and address that situation since it's near the school?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, perfect. That's all I have.
Thank you. We are at proactive initiatives. So were there any questions related to the second section, proactive initiatives?
Did Tasha Linden speak for that one? Okay, I thought I remembered. It might be, I don't know. You had mentioned the Go Kits. Is that in this section?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. What do they look like, and what's included? And do we have training for teachers and staff on where they are and how to use what's in them?
Okay, so the Crisis Go Kits, they're in each classroom. And what's in there are supplies that, in case there is like a gas leak or a shutdown and students and staff are confined to one spot. There's a bottle of water, there's a deck of cards, there are little cups, there's food ration, there's a notebook, there are pens, pencils, a whistle, there's a vest for the teacher. So it's meant to keep them calm and keep them in a situation. It's not ideal, so the food ration is meant to, just a ration to give to everyone. It's not tasty, but it is nutrients, which is what we want. The water, it has to be rationed out. There's a plastic to cover the windows. There's duct tape in there also as well. So it's meant to ensure that if there is a, say, something collapsed or they couldn't get to her or a leak outside, it's meant to keep them safe. Also with the Go Kit is Crisis Go. So you're able to communicate within that app to everyone. So certain people in the district will get that message, and it goes to the police and the fire department as well. And staff are trained on it because they use it to do their drills, their mandated drills for fire and lockdown drills in Alice. So they use it during that time. So they should acclimate themselves every year to that. This year we did replenish, and we're going to continue to replenish some of the items in the bag because they just got older and they just didn't use them. That's a good thing. So it's just to ensure that everyone has that bag. So there's one in the main office. There are ones in the office for social workers. Lincoln Center has them. You see they pull them out. So they're everywhere in the district. Welcome Center, operations. So everyone has access to this bag.
Okay. As a follow-up, just tiny.
Yes, sir.
Is there a first aid kit in every classroom?
Yes. Yes, it is. I do apologize. Yes, that's important. It's a small one. It's not a big one, but it's enough that if there's some kind of injuries, we can take care of that.
Yeah, it's something. I just bring that up because I will, Mr. Mountain knows already, but I will be emailing the student that at the civics showcase, the McFoot Challenge, he wanted those replenished and he didn't really understand why certain things were in them. And wanted to know like if they were supposed to include a first aid kit, and now I can tell that student that they have been replenished, and now I can explain what's in them, and
Yes.
it's in every classroom?
So it is a process. So some of the supplies were just out of stock. So we did run out, but we have been replenishing, and it will continue as soon as more supplies come in. So we did start 12 schools. We actually did it last week to replenish. We wanted to make sure we started the school year off with new things. So we're going to keep continuing to replenish throughout the year as soon as more of the supplies that we need come available. A lot of it was just out of stock.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Fabian?
Sorry, I just wanted to add to your training of the teachers, and you can correct me if I'm wrong. I know teachers were also trained to grab that bag in case of evacuation as well.
Yes.
And so put on that safety vest so that people can see them clearly.
Mhm.
And there are some tools that I know I have found handy, because when you have to escape, take kids out, you don't have time to get coats. So like we've done the plastic huddle to keep them warm. So there are a lot of things in there that are not just for like indoor emergencies, but teachers are trained to take them outside too.
Yes.
Okay, good.
So they should put the vest on when they're leaving out the building so we can acknowledge who they are.
Right, okay.
Ms. Lindsay?
Who should teachers contact should they're through part of the year and some of those supplies are gone, right? Because you said you're going through the process of revamping. We know things expire. We want to make sure we're giving appropriate things. So who's the best person to contact if a classroom teacher has gone through their supplies?
So initially, we'll want them to contact their building principal, because if it's just, if one teacher says it, it might be more than one. So they'll let me know, and I say, hey, collectively, can you let me know what you need in your building? And then we'll start that process of replenishing the bags.
Okay, perfect. And then still on this bag, are there phone numbers in there? Because usually we have like our phones in our pocket or it's an easy grab. So is there a phone tree so that if a teacher doesn't have a stored number, that they can contact someone?
So that's what the Crisis Go app is
That's the
for.
full app?
So
Okay,
in that
perfect.
app, it'll allow for them to speak to their building principals and me. Mr. Wilson gets it, Mr. Moulton, I believe Mr. Alajak. So certain people will get those messages along with police and fire, so we'll know. So it's meant for them to take pictures, videos, communicate, yes.
I love it. And then the only other question I had in this respect was we had the tip line. How accessible is that information? Is it just this flash? Is it just in the student handbook? Are we putting posters up around the schools for students and families to access?
So the tip line should be accessible to everyone, and they can get through it through the QR code on the back of their IDs. So it's part of the mental health page. So all of the mental health sources that we provide to 6th to 12th graders on the back of their IDs. And it's a QR code actually in the building, a poster board. So they can just click the QR code and it will lead them to whatever they need, and it leads them directly to the tip line.
Perfect.
So they can get it via QR code or website.
All right, Ms. Fabian and then Mr. Riddle.
Along the tip line, I know that the phone portion is translated, but I've requested before for that
The
Google
online.
form, the online. When I clicked on the link, it was still only in English. Is there a separate link for Spanish or somewhere else that it's in Spanish?
So we're going to create another one because that's through Crisis Go. So I have to ensure that if someone leaves a tip line in Spanish, that it makes its way to me so I can make sure that we address it right away. So right now, they do come to me and we give it to the appropriate person. But in Spanish, it's through the company. I need to make sure that with that link that I add, that it'll still go through the whole system to ensure that we're getting it properly.
I just worry that people can't read the form to
Yep, to put it in there. Yes, we're working on that.
Mr. Riddle?
Yes, two questions. Ms. London, thank you. Thank you for this presentation. The first one is, if parents or a student become aware of a potential threat, who do they contact first?
So they can contact several different ways. We like for the building principal because it's easy and they know who they are, but they can use the tip line.
Okay, they can
The
use
tip line is automatic.
All right. And
So as soon as they push the
somebody will
submit
look at
button,
that.
it comes out.
I mean, if it's 10 o'clock at night,
It still comes
doesn't
through.
matter. Somebody
Yep.
gets that tip. Okay.
Yes,
So-
me.
Okay, so they feel that they've notified somebody. And then my second question is the behavior threat assessment team. Who are those people in a particular school? Are they in a particular school, or are they with you? This team that will look at this threat, investigate it, and decide what action needs to be taken. Do we contact the police? Do we notify the principal and notify parents with a letter? How does that take place?
So there's There's several kinds. So my team is the district mental health response team. That's a little bit different. The behavior assessment teams, they have some that's in the building, and then we have one that's district-wide.
Okay.
That consists of different entities in different places, so we need to make sure it's well-rounded. So you have administrator, law enforcement, social worker, counselor, teacher, psychologist, principal, legal counsel, and then anyone else that is needed for that certain situation. So those people are on there on every team, but we want to ensure that whatever the situation is, that we have the right people. So if there's other people that need to be a part of that decision, we make sure that we include them as well.
So we're doing everything we can, and then if we send a letter or notice to parents that the threat is been contained or whatever, they can feel confident to send their children to school.
Yes,
Okay.
that's the goal. We want them in school to get educated.
Right.
Student success.
Right, and sometimes these threats come from out of state. They're not even done in our district.
Mhm.
Somebody.
We still
from what I've
take-
read, they're just they just want to cause disruption.
And
in
we
our school
we
systems.
take everyone seriously, no
Right.
matter what.
Right, so we
Mhm.
take it seriously, but sometimes we get informed by the police that these are nationwide threats that
Yes.
don't have anything to do necessarily with our district or our
Mhm.
community, but it's to disrupt school.
Yes, but we still investigate. We want to
Yes.
make sure that our community is safe. So yes, we still investigate whether, because we don't know which one is real and which one isn't. So
Exactly.
Yep.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Ms. Lindsay, I saw your hand.
I just want to add this because Mr. Riddle brought up a good point. Can we just reiterate that when the district sends out a message to our families, whether it's a soft lockdown or a hard lockdown, the assessment of it is in that moment in an ever-evolving situation. So we've had people come to the podium. I've asked the question myself of like, why was this a soft lockdown and not a hard lockdown? It's because the information, and correct me if I'm wrong, the information at that time was it was a soft lockdown, but it escalated and it was quickly turned over into a hard lockdown, even though that may not be immediately reported to families.
Mm-hmm.
Perfect.
Okay.
Yeah, and that was the same time.
Right, we gotta be clear.
Good point. Yeah, good point. Thank you.
And to that point, just as a practice also, when those alerts go out to staff, or to families,
Mhm.
if we can ensure that at least the leadership team gets those same messages, because sometimes communication is lost when families, I heard it through the grapevine, something's going on, so that at least someone can answer them appropriately with a uniformed statement to clarify all of that. So just ensuring that any communication that's sent out to families, the leadership is also aware of.
Yes, ma'am.
And my final comment related to this topic is, as we start right, is communication guidelines to parents, right? Is a lot of times parents it creates panic where kids are texting, right, from the school before the district has put out a statement. And I think if parents understand is when something is going on, if our position is we are not going to alert you until it's under control, that we should be telling that to parents up front, that we want them to get used to the way that the district communicates. Is because I think a lot of times parents are wanting to get real-time updates, and it creates, it creates, whereas you say,
cannot
hey,
be on your phone in an emergency.
and this is what I think, but parents got to understand that it's the level set of, hey, at the high school, we will have hard, soft, and these lockdowns. We're going to tell you what happened, and we're going to give you the information, but our immediate concern to not create a panic is that we don't want you coming to the school to pick up your kid. I think it has to be stated that explicitly to parents, is because the natural reaction is, well, I'm gonna go get my baby. But you coming to get your baby is going to create mass confusion and pandemonium. And so we will tell you what's happening. We will keep you alert. And I think this is one of those opportunities that we have to really set those expectations and parameters with parents as to how we will communicate. When things happen, you may hear about it on social media, but one of the reasons we want it to be accurate. And so if we say one thing too early and it turns out to be something else, that's also part of and I just think if we're honest with people in that way, especially parents, not everybody's going to agree, but 90% will at least understand and be better prepared so that the board doesn't start getting calls. What's going on when you guys are still on the ground trying to assess what's going on, right? So if we are now at, we had proactive at 7:34, school-based strategies. Any questions on school-based strategies? Ms. Lindsay.
So just to clarify, I know it was a board email, but just to make sure, when we have staff that is hired, let's say off cycle, right? Like they have not been with us from the beginning of the year, I believe the community as well as the board wants to make sure that there are monitoring procedures in place to make sure all of the needed trainings are done and they are not rushed through.
So just to clarify, make sure I'm understanding. So if a teacher or a substitute teacher or a paraprofessional or someone is hired not at the beginning of the school year when all the orientation is complete, one of the pieces that school leaders have been working towards is making sure that all their processes are documented in a building handbook. And so those are readily available for staff as they become onboarded through the hiring processes and then come familiar with their, their day-to-day schedule. We're also working on, of course, having teachers, new teachers specifically have mentors, and so that would be one of the pieces that I know Jennifer and her team are working on, are kind of mapping out the course of what are some things that as a mentor you need to be covering with your mentee, and of course safety and school-based procedures would be an element of that. So we will look at making sure that the building handbook as well as that mentor-mentee relationship is an avenue for ongoing supports, and make sure that our principals are aware that not everyone starts on the same day, and that training needs to occur throughout the year as new staff are onboarded.
Okay, perfect.
And I'm sorry, Ms. Lindsay, if I can piggyback off of that, and this may just be my ignorance, but when a new teacher is hired, right, or any staff member, are they reporting to HR for those required trainings before reporting to the school building, or are they immediately, you start next week and now you're going to the building? I just want to understand the process.
Sure, I don't want to speak for human resources because I'm not in that department, but I do know that there are some mandated reporting trainings, those types of things that are available through our frontline professional development platform, and those are automatically uploaded into any new staff member's portal. They receive email information about how to log in and what required trainings are expected. And so I know for like safety, they have to go through mandated reporter trainings before they can be boots on the ground. So I know there are some trainings that do, you have windows of time that you have to complete within the first 30 days of hire, those types of things. And those are mapped out through input from our legal counsel as well as our professional development coordinator. And we do have a chart of what has to happen on employment, what can happen within the first 30 days, what has to happen annually.
Okay, and that may be a takeaway, Superintendent. Yeah. One of the things that we do are pretty much is if it is remote, those trainings can happen before. So as part of pre-employment before you come in. The other thing is we can do a starting right program. I mean, you should be running them in cycles. And yes, it will delay. I know every day counts, right? But it will delay that teacher coming to the school. But I would much rather them coming to the school having done those things than saying, oops, we forgot, or oops, this. Because again, once you get in there, you're doing the work.
Yeah, you're busy.
Within 30 days or 60 days, coming back and making sure that it's compliant. So I thank you for bringing that up, Ms. Lindsay. And then I'll turn it back over to you.
Yeah, so I mean, and to add on to that, right, like teachers that are coming to us for the first time, I think one of the things before they start interacting with our students is making sure they're getting the culturally competent care and how we handle discipline in this district. I have a personal experience, just to be transparent, that I'm going to be heavily acute on this topic because no child deserves that. For the rapport building, we're doing that for all grades, correct?
We specifically called out the middle school, high school, because those are typically traditional areas that we want to make sure we're reporting out on. But yes, part of the Great Beginnings training that all new teachers are receiving this week is around classroom culture and relationship building and teacher rapport, and all staff are receiving part of their Institute Days next week. There's an afternoon dedicated to SEL and PBIS, and part of like setting that culture in your classrooms. That is for all staff.
Okay, perfect, because I am seeing a theme throughout the presentation that we are having a more community-focused approach with our students, so it's great to hear that we are getting our teachers to build community with their students. For the redesign, the August 8th meeting, are you guys getting RSVPs for that? Is there a large response to it? Because my concern is we have a lot of working parents on a Tuesday at the time that you're having, so if we're inviting them, you know, it would be great if it was at a time where they could actually access that information.
Yes, and so what we did, we also knew that some parents would be at work and we would need to provide transportation. So we did set that up so that if the parent couldn't come, the students could be there, all students could be there to engage in that. And so we sent out a link, and it's letting us know by each school which one needs those transportations and needs. So we are getting a good response on that. And one other thing, as you were mentioning about communication, I just want to bring this up. It is vital that our parents know that in order to get any message, we need your correct contact information. A lot of that needs to be updated yearly, and so we want to put that out to our parents. We need your most recent contact information.
That's a great point. Thank you, Mr. Berry. And then for the Waukegan High School hallway concerns and the monitoring system, I believe Mr. Wilson had proposed something that could help with the management to make sure it would reduce conflicts. Like, you know, Christine really wants to hang out with Sam during class, and I'm going to say I'm going to the bathroom, but we know that we're in a relationship and we're doing things we probably shouldn't be doing, and there's a monitoring system to say, hey, Sam's out in the hallway right now, maybe hold Christine back for a bit. Is that something that we're going to see in the high schools to help with the hallway management?
So we have worked with our student board member as well as our principal leadership team to look at the amount of students that are out in the hallway at a specific time. I don't know specifically. There was a certain e-hallway. Okay, thank you. So I need to become more familiar with that. I apologize. It's not something that's fresh for me, but I can circle back with you on that.
Okay, perfect. And then I'm almost done. Yeah. So we have a lot of the focus on managing the students' behaviors. And as an advocate for the community, we've also had some instances where the staff were inappropriate with the students. So we're talking a lot about student monitoring. Are we also, as a district, having staff monitoring as well?
Sure. So part of, I know one of the bullet points that we didn't get in depth on tonight was called Faith's Law. And part of that is to go over, we have to have an educator ethics essay policy, I believe it's called. We also have to have employee and student boundaries documented so that staff and students, staff are explicitly trained on what's an appropriate boundary. It can get across from the lines of grooming, but it also goes into physical contact. It goes into communication with students. It goes into lots of different elements related to employee-student boundaries, and that's a training aspect that all staff will be receiving this year.
Okay, perfect. I'm glad you said boundaries, but I'm gonna hold it for Ms. Schwartz. Last part on this one for me. For the student trainings on the reporting bullying, there was a year where we had 0 instances, and that's highly inaccurate. And a lot of it came down to the definition of bullying. Sure. So I just want to make sure in the training that is going to be extremely clear for our students so that we get accurate reporting in this area.
So I remember that year that you're talking about. One was COVID year, and the other one, when it comes to the bullying, it is the definition, and we want to make sure that we're labeling it correctly. So sometimes they're being mislabeled, and a lot of it is actually harassment. And even though harassment is part of bullying, it has to be labeled correctly because we want to make sure that we're providing the correct information to not only our staff and our students, but the district and the state as well. So we have to make sure that it fits the criteria, and a lot of it is harassment and it's not bullying, and we have to make sure that our families and our students know the meaning of bullying versus harassment. So that's just something we have to teach our staff and our students what bullying actually is, because a lot of it actually does fall under harassment, and harassment is a part of bullying, but it has to be egregious or so severe or so pervasive that it falls within that parameter. So I just want to make sure that we get the right definition or the right label, really bad word, but just to make sure it's under the right criteria. So I do know what you're talking about. We have to make sure, but sometimes it was a little off, and I know during COVID year we didn't have any because there was no one here. So, do apologize. Okay.
Ms. Van der Broek is
Distinguished,
behind.
thank you.
I just would like to add to that, the definition of bullying that's in the policy is the definition given in the school code, but bullying is one of those policies that will get the equity review this year.
Thank you, Ms. Van der Broek. Mr. Riddle.
Yeah, just real quick, on all of this, it looks really good, and we've heard in the past that our subs, and especially our long-term subs, don't get any of this training. Are we looking at trying to provide some of this, at least for the substitute teachers that come in? Both, the security and the these school-based strategies.
Yes, we are recommending that, and we're also trying to make sure that we can get them included in some of this new beginning training,
Good.
the great beginning training, because they need that because they're an active part of our school system.
Right, and I don't think they have access to our systems, though, so they can't get into our training programs that are online, right?
I'll have to check in with HR on that.
Dr. Cuevas, I think he knows that they don't have access, their subs don't have access to our systems. I know I've heard that as a complaint, that they can't get into the systems, not even sometimes to get, if the teacher that they're subbing for left stuff online, they can't get into it.
Long-term subs, they do have
Long-term
access to our system. Short-term subs, let's
No.
say they don't have access.
They don't have access, okay.
And that's one that's like, me and Miss Fabian had a conversation about the volunteers, right? I've had interactions with Kenosha Public School District. I was able to go in as a parent. I was able to go through whatever the trainings were, get my little certificate, and it's pretty much like we used to do. I don't know if that was crisis goal, but my green light or red light, right? Where it was good to go or not good to go. I feel like there should be a way for us to make sure that subs, if you go through this process and you're subbing in Waukegan Public Schools, this is your Waukegan Public Schools pass, right? And it would have the information, or at least information on how they can access it. And it's the same concept for volunteers. So I would like us to really think about that, because if that is a consistent concern and complaint that we're hearing from subs, while we are also struggling to find subs when they have more choice than ever before, they're going to go to districts in which they feel better supported, or that they have more access to information. So there could be something as simple as, at the beginning of the year, go to Great Beginnings, you get your Waukegan Public Schools substitute pass, and it puts you on our sub list, right? And that way we won't have people coming to the podium saying that they don't know, because, and if they don't, we at least have something to say, no, these are the things and that we can do, because that was my major question about sub training. So I see two hands. I'm gonna go to Ms. Fabian, then I'm gonna go to Ms. Gonzalez.
Just piggybacking on that, because I understand why long-term subs obviously have access, but the understanding that our short-term subs obviously may only be there for a day or two, but they may be in that particular classroom for a day or two, but they're subbing for every day or every other day. So I'm sure we have a list of those who are consistently picking up, like a sub roster of those that are consistently coming on a daily basis that we could provide that training for.
We can look into that.
And I'm not, well, Ms. Polk and Superintendent, y'all both here. This is something that I mean, I think it should also be incentivized, is if you're going to come and do the training and be there, is that it should be paid for
Yes.
that training.
Yes.
So I wanted to put that out there on the record, because we do want to be a place where substitutes feel supported, and anything that we can do in order to make them feel supported is beneficial. All right.
Completely agree.
Ms. Gonzalez.
Yeah. I just wanted to make a suggestion or a consideration. Well, I had two comments, but first consideration in regards to access. If there was a way even to have an authentication key or like a sponsor for those individuals who just are the day of being called on, I think that's, in a corporate workplace, that's how we do it. If a client needs to access our Wi-Fi and need a credential, it's like a temporary access just for that 24-hour period. So I wanted to put that out there. I don't know if Crescisco has that capability. But I do like the idea of it being integrated with the system that we already have. And then the second thing I was going to mention, you don't have to answer to that, Dr. Cuevas. You could just put it in your database. My second thing was in relation to the SEL, and I like how Ms. London, because we had reviewed the bullying and that pervasiveness was sometimes what was lacking in the definition or in that specific situation. Is there any way that families will receive that same kind of training, or just like a brief introduction to what those definitions are?
That's a good question, and I'll look into that.
Okay. Maybe that we could build that out as we, continue training our schools.
Awesome. Now, the other ones were MTSS and SEL supports. Were there questions related to that, Ms. Lindsay?
So again, I read through, there were a couple of questions submitted to the team before. So it sounds like WOW is not fully staffed right off the jump. So we're down 2, not 3 positions? We're
2
down-
as far as I know, as of right now that we put in
So
there. Yeah.
what's our plan B in those moments?
Well, as far as depending on how many kids right in the beginning within the MTSS, we'll have to look and see the need for students that are funneling in right away within the first month.
Okay.
Because it just could be that they may cover 2 different spots, but we'll get back to you.
Okay, perfect. And then there's a component of it that for BAM and WOW that I just want us to consider, because it is voluntary, right? The student or the family could opt out of it. It is a useful resource. I hope you don't. But I think if we have students who are, let's say, suspended, or they're going through the restorative justice process, I think that could be a component of it. So that, one, it's forcing them for a period of time to transition back into the school to help regulate what are their feelings as they're transitioning back after having served whatever consequences were laid out to them. So that's just a recommendation I have. I know it's tricky.
Yeah, so really what I'm hearing, this is great. So just within the vein of restoration and wellness, right? And transitioning back in a protocol that is uniform and really using our partnership to be a part of that protocol.
Yes. Thank you.
And this is where, right, I know in the presentation it talked about them being a part of the, I forget the group, help me out, Miss Schwartz. It's not MTSS, but they...
It's like tier 3.
No, where they meet collaboratively with
like in a
social
restorative
workers.
No,
or the actual BAM and WOW counselors will be participating.
Oh, yeah.
In, forget. I don't want to belay. Basically, is we have. I guess it is part of MTSS groups that are meeting and assessing students, right? Right now, is BAM or WOW counselors a part of that MTSS process?
In some schools they are,
And
yeah,
that's
for
why
sure.
That has
Yep.
to, in my opinion, that should be at every school, right?
Yeah.
It's because
Yep.
we want to make sure that I get the controversy, or people may disagree with it, but if we are investing the amount of money that we are investing in these
Yeah.
organizations, we have to be. Again, the tool is there because the board is saying the tool is needed, and we have to use the tool. And so we hold BAM and WOW accountable for not meeting numbers. But if we don't have a robust referral process, if we don't integrate them into our systems, again, it makes them feel like outsiders and be exclusionary. And I think the more that we can integrate them into that process, just like Ms. Lindsay has said, hey parents, this is what your kid is experiencing. We have this group. You're going to be suspended if that's the decision that's made. As they come back, we're asking, suggesting, requiring 3 meetings with our BAM and WOW counselor.
Yeah, for that
in order to-
required.
right, and that's the piece where we're saying, but if we are just handing them a name on a piece of paper, and I'm not saying that's what's happening, but if we are, right, if we're not making the connection, if we're not making the recommendation and the referral, parents don't necessarily know everything that exists. It's because one of the things that, just as information, when we walked through the MICFA challenge, right, we had a student that was here that said, hey, I asked for help. Nobody contacted me. We did all of that, going into the schools, talking about access to mental health. However, when I went through the MICFA challenge again this year, almost 30% of the projects and presentations were about how there was a lack of access to those types of supports. And then what's frustrating from a board perspective is our role is finances. So then when I go and I ask the question, well, do you guys know who CYN is? And every one of them who did a presentation said no. However, there are 2 counselors that are in our school. That's all they do. It's like, I don't know what else as a board I can do. If I'm setting the money aside, if I'm providing the resources, again, that is how we are going and supporting the students. So I appreciate all the work. I just really want us to focus on making sure that our parents know what the resources are, that our students know what the resources are, that they know how to access them, because I don't want to walk around a room and say, we need this thing, and I go, well, these are the 10 things that we got. So there's a disconnect between what's being provided and what the students know exists. So I want to incorporate them as much as possible.
And just to reiterate, just to make sure, so what I'm hearing you say is that our partnerships beyond BAM-WOW, CYN, formerly AHS, right, but Jocelyn, right, our SEL counselors are a part of the process, and that they're sitting at the table when decisions are made in the verb of MTSS.
100%.
Got it.
Miss Fabian.
So I would also encourage, one practice is reaching out to the kids to see what form of communication works for them. My high schoolers will tell you they are overwhelmed and bombarded with emails, because anytime anything goes into their classroom, they get an email. So what they have suggested, what works for the majority of them, is that they typically just log into their Google Classrooms and see what assignments have been put in there. If there could be like a folder that's like, here's some flyers for the students, here's mental health resources, because then they would be more likely to see them. But then I would also again suggest if there's a way to kind of survey or have some kind of forum for them to tell you how do they best receive this information, because again, many of them, we're emailing this stuff out, but they're not opening them up because they get 100 emails a day. So
Yes.
you know,
So
just
what
be
I
more strategic.
what I believe I'm hearing, which I completely agree and I understand that, is bringing to our schools, right, specifically 6th through 12th grade, especially when where kids are having emails, right, and where they may not be receiving it as intricately with one teacher, right, all day, is really this will be one of the problem-solving agendas within their teams, because it's really about developing teams so that they get the voice, they get the student voice, they get their teacher voice to come up with what works for them, so that they possibly a solution might be we have advisory news within our middle schools. We have advisory, like what universal message is being shared across all of our 5 schools. We have this vein of communication, and so how do we utilize our systems and infrastructures that we have? And I could see something within our high school that it is on our TVs when we're eating lunch, right?
Exactly.
Like what kind of news is there for kids that they're seeing on the repeat, almost like osmosis?
Yeah.
Thank you.
And then the second part is, and I know we've had this conversation, is circling back to Aubrey and making sure that those community partners that are part of our collaboration are also getting onboarded onto that Aubrey app that will eventually launch. So that way, again, that's
That we're
included all
singing
of
in
the stuff.
concert
Yeah.
and in symphony. Thank you.
And that we know the resources. Again, we are resource rich, and I saw Miss Dotson, so I know the Wraparound Center will do a lot of that, right? But I do go is when you have students that are dealing with complex traumas and there are multiple things going on, being able to tie back that family thing. These are the 5 community organizations that we can offer to you, is because I do understand the school can't do everything. We shouldn't. We have been tasked with it based on society. We feed them, we clothe them, we educate them, and we will continue to do so. But how do we support families in that process? And we spend money on the Ombre platform, so I definitely want to elevate what Ms. Fabian is saying, is because that can be a one-stop access of directories where you don't have to walk into a wraparound center, but parents can access it and that information is there.
So I would like to remind the board that the parent-student handbook has been updated with all of that information and codes to those links. And I just confirmed with Dr. Cuevas that that handbook and a folder to it, and a link is pushed and placed on every student's computer. So they do have that electronic access that way, if they remember it's in the parent-student handbook. And so if when talking to parents, you could remind them it's on your child's computer, if you look in the parent-student handbook, that would be helpful as well.
I'm glad you brought that up, Ms. Vanderbroek, because in my mind, I get text messages all the time from the district, right? Granted, it goes back to having the proper number on file, but if we could just have like a monthly reminder, like, hey, just remember mental health support's out there, because the handbook is full of great information. Transparently, I look at it at the beginning of the year, and then it's out of sight, out of mind, because we're go, go, go. So if we're constantly putting it in their face, maybe this is the month that they're going to say, now I need it, or now I'm ready to talk to somebody.
And so it is 8 p.m. I don't know if there are any critical questions. I know we didn't go through every section, but I do want to be respectful of time. Were there any other questions that any board members felt like needed to be addressed for the good of the group related to the presentations overall? I saw your hand, Ms. Fabian. I see your hand, Ms. Lindsay. So I'll go down to that side first.
I'm going to lump mine, and it's a very quick question. I did submit it, but I did not receive an answer on all of these DEI trainings and the safety protocol trainings, just finding if there's a way that we can have those open to the public so the board can also be included, the community members can be included, and families can be included, so we're all speaking the same language, using the same terminology, and understanding how procedurally we're doing things in the culture and climate of our school district. That is all.
Yes, for that.
Okay, I'll try to be quick. So we just had 2 of our ESS employees go to the NASRO, National Association of Student Resource Officers, for their National Safety Conference. And then we had some expanding on safety officer training, so I'm kind of curious to hear what they heard at that conference. But I just want to make sure that we are including child development, because oftentimes we, and I'm including the community in on this, we treat these children as if they are adults. I get it, high schoolers are taller, they look mature, but they are still children. So we cannot expect them to think like an adult, even though some of their decisions may be adult-like. So I just want to make sure that we're keeping that child development in our perspective, because they are truly kids. And then I just want to make a comment so the public knows DCFS is overloaded as a department. They are not getting to all of the cases. So if you are looped in anything with DCFS, please, please, please continue to follow up, make the time, do it, because that department's overloaded. And then Ms. Schwartz, boundaries, right? We all know children push boundaries.
Yes.
So in the responsive training, the culturally responsive training that we're going to do, is boundaries part of that conversation on how children will push yours and we need to maintain? Or
That
is
is not a part of the culturally responsive teaching and leading practices training. Okay. However, it is a part of the emotional intelligence training, which is the precursor before people enter into the culturally responsive teaching and leading practices training.
I love that it's in.
Yes.
Thank you very much. That's it.
And I will say is I think as some of my teachers, right, who still teach, are now teaching my children, right,
Yes.
and they love that, is how are we talking about the different, and I don't want to call it intergenerational, right, but how are we introducing
It is.
that? Is that we
Technology.
talk about gentle parenting, and people make but I remember and I recall, just very brief anecdote, where my son was playing on the tablet.
Mhm.
I wanted him to come and clean up something for me. He said, I will as soon as I finish. Or he said, I will, can I finish this game, right? Growing up, Brandon didn't get to finish the game. It was a stop and move, or something would happen. However, I respected that. He'd been doing this for 20 minutes, and so he's like, I'm going to do it. I just want to finish this. He finished, put the tablet down, got up, did what it was I was asked. And that's one of those where, even from how I was talked to as a student and what my response was expected to be in comparison to how we are raising some of our children and what that looks like in the classroom. Is there anything that addresses
Yes.
that? Okay.
Absolutely. Also, even down to the responses, right? In my family, if I responded to with what to my mother, it wasn't a big deal. But in another family, saying what to an authority figure was instant disrespect, right? And understanding those cultural nuances, not just black, brown, white, but also generationally, right? Social media is a culture, right? There is a culture of social media. So we do talk about the changes because as a millennial, I feel very much like a middle child, right? We're right in between. We weren't born with it, but really understanding that intersectionality of media, social media, culture, and being able to be responsive to that is an important piece of being able to connect with our youth these days and understanding what they're going through, what they're addressing.
I'm just going to add on to that because we also do the gentle parenting or authoritative parenting in our household. And when I met with one of the teachers, they said, well, if you don't want to have rules in your household, that's fine. But in my class, this is how it's going to roll. So I'm glad to hear that that's going to be built in because as a parent, I will not be disrespected in that manner because scientifically, this is the best approach. So I'm glad our teachers are going to get some of those supports.
Yes, and in communicating with families.
Yeah.
Yes, it's a part of the training.
I love it.
Yep.
I love it.
Part of the new standards.
Thank you. So,
It's actually a part of ISB standards, the culturally responsive teaching and leading practices standards. It's a large piece of that as well.
Love it. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. So we appreciate all of the comments, questions, and the time that was spent. So with that, I would now like for a motion to adjourn.
Motion.
Motion by Ms. Fabian.
Second.
Second by Ms. Gonzalez. All in favor, signify with aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay. Meeting is adjourned. Let's take 5 minutes, and then if we can meet back for our finance committee, which, because I didn't receive any questions, I'm expecting to go quickly. for Waukegan Public Schools. If I can have a roll call, please.
Mr. Riddle, Mr. McBride, President Ewing,
Here.
Ms. Hannah, Ms. Gonzalez,
Here.
Ms. Fabian,
Present.
Ms. Lindsay.
Here.
I want to first say thank you for bearing with us to get through our previous special meeting. And now I will turn it over to you, Ms. Pope.
Good evening, Board President, board members, the superintendent, I'm sure she's coming back, colleagues, community. We want to present to you Budget Workshop 3, which is customary that we have 3 budget workshops. First, so that we promote transparency and so that the board and community is abreast and apprised of what the district is planning to do.
And before you go, oversight on my part, if we can do the procedural, we have item 3A, the approval of the June 6, 2023 minutes. Do we have a motion to approve?
Motion.
Motion by Ms. Fabian, second by Mr. Riddle. Any comments, questions, corrections to the minutes? All in favor signify with aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay. Minutes are approved. All right, now we are at the presentation.
And so we want to start by having our enrollment projections by Mr. Eric Christensen.
Good evening, Board President, members of the board, staff, and community members. Here with the enrollment projections for next year. If you can scroll down to the bottom half of that, I'm just going to really generally talk about what's been going on. It's got the past 7 years here, and you see we've been in a decline over the past 7 years. As that goes through, there's been various reasons. COVID was a big impact, and other factors have been an impact too. But we've been in a decline, as has much of the country, and Illinois and Chicago has been in a decline over these past few years. As it looks for this next school year, the decline over the past 7 years really started in our elementary schools, and it's built its way up. The high school, I anticipate having a slight decline, not a large decline, but the slight declines are starting to hit the high school, and over these next few years, the decline will hit the high school. This coming year, there's going to be a big decline to the middle schools. I anticipate the middle schools losing about 10 sections of students across the 5 middle schools, so about 2 classes per middle school at the middle school level for that decline. The elementary, though, is slowing its decline and it's stopping its decline, and it's coming out to be pretty even. So where the elementary's been in a big decline in the past few years, I do anticipate it's going to be evening out. One caveat about that is Learn Charter School, if you've been down Glenflora Avenue, is building on classrooms. The past 7 years, Learn Charter has been consistently about 410 to 430 students. When I went to their lottery this past March, they are advertising more seats that are going to be available for the coming year. So I do anticipate that Learn Charter will be having a larger enrollment. How many of those will come from Waukegan Public School students, and how many from the private schools, and how many from homeschool students, we do not know yet, but they are advertising more seats. The number of applications they had in March was fairly low, though. So like us, there was not a large pool for them to gather from, so the number of students that they had applications for, they had much more seats for, because they're anticipating opening up classrooms.
Are we waiting to the end?
Yes, please.
Yes. Yes, and so that's my overview of high school, slight decline, middle school about 10, and then the elementary schools is probably going to be a decline about 2-3 classrooms across the entire elementary school range.
Thank you, Mr. Christensen.
We can't ask questions yet.
You're just on down.
Yeah.
I mean, is that all Mr. Christensen has to present on?
Yes.
Okay,
Oh,
now,
okay,
Mr.
we can
Christensen, come
ask
on back.
now.
We'll do that so you can get out of here.
Thanks, Board President.
Thank you.
So, questions for Mr. Christensen?
I just had a really quick one. Do you believe the middle school is declining because Learn recently, or has Learn recently opened up to the middle schools? Because weren't they originally just like K through 5, and then they
No.
started rolling up?
Yeah, no,
Or
this
were
is
they always K8?
this is the decline at the elementary schools. 4 to 7 years ago was a big decline, so that decline is raising. Now those groups of children are now becoming 6th, 7th, and 8th graders, so those are smaller classes, smaller graduation cohorts are making their way up. Learn typically gets a big base, and as they matriculate out and they don't replenish through there, so they don't add more students in middle school. They may replace, but they don't add.
Ms. Lindsay?
So I'm really interested around the all-day pre-K at Carmen. So do we have metrics on, did that pre-K program see an increase in students because they're offering full day?
So I'm not aware of the pre-K. Mandy? Yes. Right. So in terms of pre-K in general, pre-K in general really took a big hit for COVID, and it has been it's been coming back this past year. So the beginning of last year was very low numbers for pre-K, and as they went through the year, it bounced back up. So I do see our kindergarten numbers are really growing this past spring and the summer, and I'm anticipating the pre-K numbers are doing the same thing, where they are coming back to the school environment. COVID really kept them at home.
Perfect.
Thank you for the question for the full day pre-K. Carmen Buckner is in my area, and I did receive updates from Mr. Silva on a regular basis, and we are completely full of students who have wanted to participate in our full day pre-K program. So we are fully staffed and fully full with kids.
Is there a waiting list in place?
Not that I'm aware of, but I can inquire.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
And as we talk about strategic investments moving forward, Ms. Polk and Superintendent, one of those is replacing our decline in enrollment with an emphasis on all-day pre-K as an alternative, right? Is because if we increase those seats, we know that is one of 68% of our students fall below the poverty line, and access to a high-quality early child care will help us overcome that issue. So, any other questions related to enrollment for Mr. Christensen?
Board President,
Yes, go ahead, Mr.
I don't know if
Ray.
I can ask this question or not. I wasn't clear that we have all-day pre-K at Carmen, right? Because when I went on the website and was looking for the schedules, I didn't see that on the schedule for all-day pre-K. But do you know how many students we have in our pre-K all-day pre-K at Carmen?
Yes, currently we have the opportunity right now for 2 classrooms and the capacity to run this pilot and to get the kinks out, right, with the curriculum, the resting, the snack, for a full day for kiddos, but 2 classrooms, one monolingual of about 20 and one dual language about 20.
220, so about 40 kids in
That's
pre-K.
right.
Okay.
That's right.
Okay, great. And we're going to monitor that and see how it
That's
goes
right.
and see if the excitement grows and we can continue.
Yeah, for all the processes, the collaboration, the communication, adding in new curriculum, the training for that.
Okay, great.
But for the most part, we're in our 3rd year of our grant, for our Preschool for All grant, in which we will, once we have hit the limit of that, it is really looking for the extension for a longer day for all of our kids. Right, but it's bigger than that. Logistically, it's bigger than that. It's doubling staff, and or minimizing staff, just depending on where it would be. It's if we're offering an AM and a PM for our preschool, right? Currently, right now, up to 800 students, going full day brings us to 400, and so we have to look at how many kids we have out there. So it's a bigger process than just do it, right? So, and also the bargaining of teachers and all of that.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's why we're kind of going slow to go fast within this, so we can work out multiple kinks on the academic side and the social emotional development side. Also, why we see what we need to do to build up towards rewriting that grant once our time is ready to do that.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
And this is budgeting, but I also want to say one of my takeaways is let's be creative and collaborative. As I think about the number of child care centers throughout Waukegan, I think about the United Way Success by Six program. I think about who may be most equipped to run a full all-day preschool, and is there an opportunity, right, with Bright Start, with others, to support that and leverage some of the funds that are being offered by J.B. Pritzker to say, okay, if we can support 400 full day, how do we, you know, see how we can get those other 400 plus, right? So I just want us to say that's not a immediate, but I continue to say let's be collaborative, let's think creatively, and let's partner with those that are already doing this work really, really well to see how we can help build their capacity. Ms. Lindsay.
So just to add on to this conversation, right? So I recently had one of my kids go through Lightfoot, and as a parent, it was a very hard decision for me to do that 2-hour day, because it's like, it's 2 hours, what are you going to do? And I think that's the intent behind this pilot program, working out the kinks, because many of our families are like, what am I going to do with 2 hours, right? And so by having that as an option, they're going to be able to access it. And then hopefully with that all-day pre-K, we will see these numbers continue to grow for our district.
And definitely Ready to Learn and Kindergarten Ready. So it's multifaceted. It's not only that, it's like holistic. Like the vision would be this holistic full day preschool that is developmentally appropriate for play and all the wonderful things that we would want our children to go through a full day. But also what Principal Silva is working on is extended day, because that's important too to that point. So really thinking about it from a parent, like, great, still 303 is wonderful, and what about the opportunity to have this extended day? And so how could we systematically work that out within our bargaining agreement and having funds for that? And ultimately, we're even talking through if I need to go to work early, what are some pre-things? So so all of that in support of our families, for our littles, to prepare them early on for literacy, right, and ready for kindergarten, so that they're hitting those needs, but really focusing on developmentally appropriate pedagogy, in hopes that when we can really lay that foundation and give them the time needed, again, developmentally, but it's a hard time for little 3-year-olds, right? So with that being said, the professional development that's needed for staff, and you know, thinking trajectory out the way 5 to 10 years, what effect can that have? Just that movement of getting that right, what effect can that have when students are in middle school is very important, and they all are woven together, of all of these things being pulled together, and how we have and prepare our students to be at grade level.
Thank you. All right, thank you, Ms. Christensen. And if we can get the presentation back up.
The next thing on the agenda are the new position requests. We have an attachment there. If you would click on that.
Copy paste.
And if you reviewed it, we had one tab that was for operations and one tab that was for ASAP. There's one addition to the operations list, and that is a transportation and food service specialist, and an approximate cost of $46,000. And then on the ASAP list, you'll see stipends listed there, but there's a GLAD trainer, 1 FTE. You'll have a newcomer psychologist.
Sorry, Ms. Pope. Can Lee, down at the bottom, there's operations and ASAP tabs. Yeah, there you go.
If you would click on the, yes, ASAP.
There you go.
That's
ASAP
operations, and that's ASAP. And so we've attached that so that you could look through it, but I'm kind of just going over the FTEs, because also incorporating in there are stipends, right? So the FTEs for ASAP is 1 GLAD trainer, a newcomer psychologist, another GLAD trainer, and also there is a ASD specialist and 5 social workers. And so the next agenda item we had was to request that the board give us a head nod as we did before so that we could proceed in hiring the positions for the start of school.
Gwen, I do have a question though, because I don't see it here.
Yes, ma'am.
Previously at a budget meeting, there was a request from SBB from the high school regarding what it looked like was safety officers. And after further clarification, it is not safety officers, it is restorative. What is the title, Miss Patty? So what I'm hearing is culture climate specialist would be the title, and is that in here now? Okay, so you're going to bring that back as student achievement. Okay. And then just for the public, we recently presented on our Black Male Achievement Plan, and I had spoke with Dr. Null earlier, and there is a plan of where those funds would come from. Gwen, can you speak to that, just so it does not appear that it's not in this budget?
We have reserves that are there. I had previously spoken with the superintendent about those budgets, and so we have adequate budgets that are inside of what we're proposing to you tonight. It may not be clearly identifiable, but we have the funds available. So I don't know, I was kind of looking for like consensus that we could proceed with hiring those positions that were just mentioned.
Yes.
Yes.
Sure. Thank you.
Yes.
So does that mean that they'll be posted soon, or?
I'm looking at Amanda in the back, Dr. Nolt, the positions that were recommended for ASAP.
And then just to clarify, so posting is a passive recruitment effort. What are the active recruitment efforts?
Mm-hmm.
Some of the positions may be new job descriptions that would need to be created depending on the title. So the GLAD trainer is not something that we have had in the district historically. It would be a new position, so we would need to collaborate on the creation of that job description with the department leader who has made that request. Once we had that job description approved and vetted, making sure that all the elements of the expectations of that person are spelled out, it would then go forth for posting. And then in collaboration with Human Resources and the department leader, actively seeking out candidates for that type of role would be something that we would want to do to be that proactive piece.
So then, follow-up question. So we're giving the head nod. Would the new position and description come before the board before it's posted?
I'm not sure what typical protocol has been. I see superintendent saying potentially no, but I don't.
It hasn't historically come before. To my knowledge, unless
it's just when the hire happens that it comes
the
before.
hire happens. I mean, and I'm looking at what she's nodding yes, but if it was at student achievement where we're bringing like two positions, we tend to attach it at that point.
Okay. Yeah, just so that we know. I mean, I think I would prefer knowing what role what gaps the role is filling, especially if it's new positions. But if it hasn't historically, then
yeah. And Ms. Hannah, did you want to say something? Because I don't want to cut you off. Okay. But there is no problem of sending the job descriptions that are the new ones that are listed here to the board. We'll get that to you guys.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Item D.
The 6-month ESSA review, if you would pull up that for me, please. As is required by statute, we have to do the 6-month ESSA review. And so this first slide, if you would pardon me as I turn my back because I have to look at it here. Which category best describes the relationship? So you'll see that 39.5% of the respondents were parents or family members. Next slide, please. Here we had 74.4% of the students with disabilities who responded to this question, community advocates. Oh, you can't, okay, sorry. Sorry, next slide, please. So we wanted to know, I mean, how many people have, the past community ESSA surveys indicated that the community valued as a top priority the spending of ESSA 3 grant funds on instructional or school-based staff salaries. And we wanted to know if the community supported this initiative. I think we kind of explained this before, why we were trying to do this. And so we see that 80% of the respondents at the time we pulled this survey were in agreement with us. I think that it's a wise strategy for the district because it would allow us to ensure that we're spending the money on time, right? And also is for an allowable cost. And so we consulted with ISB. It is allowable, it's approvable. And I strongly recommend to the superintendent and also to the Board of Education that we take this proactive approach. Next slide. 81% here, it's also reiterating, you know, that we've had learning loss, and we want to help the end date is pretty much what we just explained to you. And we see that the community here with the survey, 81% of them agree with us. Next slide. We wanted to know, do you believe that we're addressing community interests with how we're spending the money? We see that more than half, 60% of the community says that the district is. We're addressing their needs. Next slide. How many people first, second, third time completed the survey? And you'll see the percentages depicted here. I asked Mr. Lattimore, who is unable to make it here tonight, how many respondents we had, and it was about 260 respondents to the survey. Next slide, if there's one. So that's the last of that. We're taking questions now, or should I proceed?
Any questions on the survey?
Well, I just had a clarifying question.
Ms. Lindsay, I saw your hand there. Ms. Gonzalez.
If yours is clarifying, it might be the same as mine.
Go ahead, Ms.
So,
Gonzalez.
at the time, so it's 260 respondents, but at the time that it was pulled, it's 195?
Yes.
Okay.
Ms. Lindsay.
I just want to use this moment to engage the community to complete these surveys, because 260 for a district of upwards more than 14,000 students, that's disappointing. I did have someone reach out to me directly saying that they couldn't find the survey, and I'm not pointing any fingers because I know there's been a big push from the communications team to remind our constituents, we have the survey, do it, do it. But if there's a way to just have anything like this we want their engagement, that's front and center on our district website so that it's easy for people to access. But I know there was a lot of effort to get that information out. So community, engage with us, tell us before, not after, because we can't fix what's happened.
Thank you very much for that, and I wanted to thank Mr. Nick Alajakis and his team because they've been extremely supportive of us in these endeavors. So, thank you, Nick.
Okay, and now let's go to item E.
I'm just going to just pass over this one, but this is what was passed by the state. This is the state budget. It gives us a guide on how much we're going to project that we're going to receive in the district. We kind of gauge it on evidence-based funding because that's huge for us. And we'll note, if you look at that it's a 4.4% increase at the state level. We typically don't get this type information until well into the year, the end of September or October. So it's sort of hard for us to project. So we kind of take a very conservative approach in projecting this, and then you also know that we give some of our evidence-based funding to Learn Charter Schools. So, but you'll note here the varying percentage increases that the state has passed by the General Assembly. Next, please. If you would open up the budget presentation, please. Yes. Much of this information you've already seen, so we're going to go through it very quickly. Just want to point out some things. I want to stop here if you have a comment. Superintendent Placencia. Nope. Okay. We're going to keep going. Keep going. If you have questions, stop me, but we've seen this stuff before, right? Okay, so keep going. I want to point out here that after this budget workshop, we have to post the notice in the newspaper, and this budget has to be on public inspection for 30 days. We normally try to present the budget adoption at the beginning of September, so if there's corrections or some changes that we need to make, we can make those before the statutory deadline, which is the end of September. So that's why we have the budget hearing and adoption on September 12th. Gives us 2 weeks in case there's some changes. Next slide, please. You've seen this before, so we're going to go over that. You've seen that. We're going to go past that. I kept hearing some of these words in the previous meeting, so I loved hearing that. Next slide, please. I want to stress for us in the business office, and I'm quite sure for the superintendent, solvency, compliance, transparency, inclusivity, equity-based, and needs focus. That's our mantra, and I'm quite sure it is for the district as well. Next slide, please. Yippee, hooray. This one, we presented this slide, but you see that there is an addition here. The addition is the pending tax receipts of the $260,000. Those monies are not included in the budget document because I was finalizing it and didn't have a chance to put it in there, right? But thank you very, very much for those who notified us about this. We were extremely happy. Any money is good money for our district, so $260,000 is welcomed. Next slide.
That's from the clerk. That's from
Yeah.
the clerk.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Vega.
Yes, keep streamlining.
Yeah, find some more, right?
Right.
Got it.
All right, next slide, please. You've seen this before. It's just a breakdown of the percentages of where our money comes from. You'll see that the bulk of our money here comes from state. Next slide. I do want to go over this slide because we've had some changes here, and I want to make sure that we're going over these numbers. You'll see that for the operating funds, and that's how the district health is measured. You'll see across the education, operation and maintenance, transportation, and working cash fund, the beginning fund balance is approximately $118.6 million. I don't know in my tenure in the district if we've ever had that much money. When I first came to the district, I have to take my glasses off this way. When I first came to the district, I think across all of the funds, we had 32 million. Yeah, I was going to say 32. We had $32 million. Is that right, Mr. Luosa? And we were fiscally challenged. So now for us to see $118.6 million is something that I've not seen ever in this district.
I want to pause there. I want to first, because there's a lot of criticisms sometimes that happen. But I do want to thank previous boards who had to make the necessary concessions in order to preserve the health, who couldn't do the type of investments that we've been able to, and took a lot of flack for it. So I do want to thank those previous boards, and I want to thank the finance department as a whole for implementing the new strategy, is because it makes sure that we're not just rolling over budgets and spending money to spend money, but that we're doing it in a focused way. It's because I always want to remind is even though we have more money than we've ever had, is based on the own state's standard, we are still spending less than 100% of our adequacy mark. So I will always say is it looks good, but it should be higher and there should be more. And so thank you, Ms. Polk. But I don't want anybody to believe that this means that everything that we want to do should be able to do for our students is possible. But I do appreciate the work of those who came before this board, and for the federal government and state who stepped up to make sure that we are getting more of our fair share, even if we haven't hit that 100% adequacy mark yet.
Thank you for your kind words. It takes a team to really get it done, and so I applaud everybody in the district who has worked hard to make this happen. But I do agree with you that the state deserves to get us more money. When I look at what we're entitled to, we're entitled to over $200 million for us to be adequate. And the mere fact that we're tier 1 lets us know that we're not getting enough money, right? So, but our strategic approach and how we're spending money is helping us to maintain this level of fund balance. And we're able to do some of the things that we need to do, like the capital, to reserve $30 million without going out for a bond, right? To pay down on our debt, that sort of thing. And then also to do incentives when asked impromptu.
Thank you, Ms. Polk.
We could do stuff like that. And so I think that is a direct and it's attributed to, yes, the previous board and the previous administration, but also kudos go to the current administration for maintaining it, because it has grown over time, right? So I'm appreciative for that.
Thank you, Ms. Polk.
So you'll see across all of the revenue what we're projecting. Again, when we're projecting the revenue, we're taking a very conservative approach. We don't know what it's going to be, right? So we're saying that we believe that it would be about $243 million in the ed fund, right? We believe that it'll be about 12.3 in O&M. We believe that it'll be about 15.4 in transportation. And of course, you know, we get property taxes alone in the working cash fund because there's no expenses there. So we believe we'll get about $212,000 there. So about 270.8 or 7 million total across in revenues, we believe, in operating funds. For the expenditures, if you look at it, you'll see that there's more expenditures than there's revenue. Okay, I kind of want to explain some of that. I don't do one for one when it comes for grants, because sometimes we don't get the money at the same time we spend it. So I have to look at kind of the trend data. That's why you often hear me talk about we can't just look at the budget, right? We have to look at our cash flow, right? So here you'll see that in the revenue 242, expenditures 267, right? And then across you'll see that going across. So total expenditures we're projecting to be 297 million, right? So you say, why are you negative spending? We've been doing that for years, even before Ms. Placencia, for years, because we don't get enough revenue in, right, to cover our expenses. So we know that. So what covers that? Our bank account covers that. So you'll see the beginning fund balance plus the revenue minus the expenditures is what we project will be the ending fund balance. And we're still projecting in the operating funds that we'll have $92 million, but that's not the end of the story because we got to look at the other funds. We got to look at the other funds. Next slide. When we look at Fund 30, 50, 60, 80, and 90, you'll see that we have in capital projects a negative $17 million. We had a historical $4.8 million negative coming into all of the capital improvements that we were doing. And so we built that up now to 17.4. Brian knows that I say all the time, I don't want to take the money out of the ed fund. I don't want to take it out of O&M. I don't want to take it out of transportation because that's where our health is measured. And once you put it into capital projects or life safety, you can't get it out. So I'd rather move it when we need to move it, because you remember we have a resolution of $30 million that we can move. So some of the $17.4 million will not be negative. It's only because I haven't moved the money there yet, right? Because we don't know if we're going to need it. We need to leave it over there and we need to preserve our health, right? So you'll see also in the TART fund, we're coming in because we had loans. At the beginning of the year, matter of fact, I need to do that very quickly. You give me the authority to be able to loan from different funds throughout the year. I need to come back with that resolution so that we're permitted to loan to the funds when we're low in cash. So across the beginning and these other funds, which are not our operating funds, you see that we have a negative $12 million there. The revenue across those, I'm just going to go to the far right, the total, so we can get through this. You see I'm projecting that there's approximately $41.7 million in those funds. And across those funds, I'm projecting that there's about $40.8 million in expenditures. So overall, we're projecting that we're going to have a deficit across these other funds of $11 million. 11 million, yeah. Next slide, please. We want to look at between the operating funds and the other funds, where are we projecting the district to be at the end of the fiscal year? We're projecting that we're going to be about $81 million. Still well above what I said before, right? 32 million. We're still well above that. Okay? But I do want to note, if you look at your leisure, if you look at the budget document that we have to present to the state, you'll see in the upper right corner of the first page that it shows you that it's not a balanced budget, but a deficit reduction plan is not required. I know some of you probably saw that. But that simply means that we're spending more in the current year than we're receiving, but our ending fund balance is able to absorb it. But if we ever go outside of the limits of what we're presenting to you right now, then the state is going to force us to do a deficit reduction plan. They're going to force us to reduce our expenditures. So we watch those things very closely, and during the budget process, that's when we ask for cuts so we could stay under that.
Ms. Polk, I just want to call out and highlight something that you mentioned as a strategy, is we keep more funds in the education fund, not because all of those funds are 100% for things that are going into the classroom, but because it gives you the greatest flexibility.
That's right.
And so
Absolutely.
I understand that. I know we don't have a lot of people here, but they'll go back and watch that. And I think at times when we're making those transfers, there's confusion that we're taking away from the classroom versus, no, we've already planned to spend these items.
Absolutely.
I'm just keeping them there so if we get a water main break, if something happens while we're waiting on money from the government,
Absolutely.
that we can still pay our bills and we have the greatest amount of flexibility with those funds.
That's right. Because we can only loan to certain funds. and it's operating funds. So we want to keep that money there for that reason. Thank you. Next slide, please. Past boards always wanted us to present the information so that you can see between the objects, how we're spending the money, salaries, benefits, purchase services, supplies, and so forth. And so that's how we presented this information. And you could see that the bulk of the monies that the district is spending is obviously where in salaries. And so that's where it is. And that's not unique to Waukegan. It just isn't. Next slide, please. The previous board also wanted us to show that we were spending most of the money in the district in instruction. And you'll see here that that is the case as well. Most of the money is spent in instruction and also in support services. So you'll see that we have principals, we have, the teachers and all of that in instruction and support services. Next slide, please. This is a comparability report we're required by the state to compare like schools to make sure that the budget that we're given to them is equitable. And so we've done a preliminary comparison here. Revisions are required, but you'll get the gist of what we're required to do before we come before you with budget adoption. We literally have to look at schools that have a similar enrollment, right? And make sure that they're getting equitable funding in the budget. Next slide, please. So do we have any questions? The last two agenda items were inside of this presentation. But we just put it in the agenda because we needed to highlight that. Are there any questions? Yes, ma'am.
I don't get the local paper delivered to my house. For the virtual copies, is there going to be, and maybe Nick's the appropriate person, or you, is the virtual copy for Waukegan community members going to be behind a paywall, or is it going to be free and accessible?
Virtual copy, kind of.
So like online, like if I go to their website, if you go to the Chicago Trib, there's paywalls.
Mm-hmm.
Do we know if that's going to be the case for this information when it's posted in a couple of days?
So generally, if you look at the digital, what they call is like the digital edition of the newspaper, which is, it's kind of like a mirror of the paper copy, that would be behind a paywall. I've experienced where occasionally you can get to it without the paywall, and we have a login, so we've never had to use it without a paywall, but an individual would have to have a subscription, presumably, to the newspaper to be able to access that.
And there's no workaround the district can do to get this out to the community so there is no paywall? Or that would be violating some things?
I'm sure the Chicago Tribune would have issue with us giving out passwords and the such.
Well,
Another
yeah,
alternative is to get it into, I know there's a new state statute from a few years ago where communities are encouraged and in some instances required to, if you have a certain population of individuals that speak Spanish in your community, to put that into a Spanish language newspaper. So in those instances, we have used Puro Football, which is a Spanish language paper that distributes in our area. And for those, in that situation, it would be free for obviously our community to see it.
Okay, great. I just want to make sure that it's accessible to a majority of our community members, and it's great that it's in pro football.
But it would be online as well, right? So in addition to us putting it in the newspaper, this presentation is also accessible in board docs. So that's one of them with the hyperlinks.
It is. It's just sometimes what happens in the meeting isn't accurately reflected in what's in the paper. So just making sure that they have
Oh,
those
no, the
pieces.
paper one's just a notice.
Fabulous.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we're required by statute to put a notice in the paper, and the minimum that we need to do is to have it available in the district office.
Okay.
We've not ever put this budget in the newspaper.
Yeah.
We haven't. We just had it accessible for anyone who wanted to come and see it, and that's what we put in the notice. We could certainly put a link. We have a link already online for all of our budgets. That's a requirement. We've not put it on the website until it was adopted. But if it's a desire of the superintendent, then we could put the draft, but we need to let everybody know that it's not an adopted budget. It's a budget under review.
Yeah. I would be
Ms.
against
Gonzalez?
that. Sorry. I was gonna say that it would be on our website once adopted, Ms. Polk. The only reason I'm against it being a draft under review in the website is because I think community members would be confused of like, oh, it said this and now it was taken off and now it says something different. And I really, to Ms. Lensing's point, I don't think a lot of our community members know how to use board docs. And we should be empowering them and giving them agency to learn how to. It's not perfect. I have problems with board docs too. But that way they could learn how to use this tool, because this is also some money. But I just wanted to say that because now I don't want people to think like, oh, it's going to be on there right now. Like, no. Go to board docs first, and then once adopted, go to our website, go to board docs, go to see the announcement that it's been adopted. Yeah.
And maybe it's just a quick link on the main page of the district website to go directly to the board doc presentation, right? I just had two more pieces.
And then I see you, Ms. Fabian.
So around the confusion that Board President Ewing brought up, and you had also confirmed and clarified, when we have the educational funds, that's kind of a ever-evolving location because it offers us the flexibility of those funds if we need to move it. Is there a way, because again, it comes back to being transparent with the community and building their trust, is there a way for us to at least highlight, like, of this amount while it's in the ed fund, a certain percentage, or these funds are earmarked to be for others and you can plan to see them being taken out? I don't know how finite of a number that's going to be, or if it's a general aspect, but some way to build in some transparency so that we get less, anxious responses when we do move those funds.
Yes, that's a good question. But we can't move it out unless there's a resolution.
Right.
And we came to the board already for that $35 million resolution. And so the verbiage that was in that resolution, intentional verbiage that was in the resolution, was to transfer the money as needed, right? And then we would have to come to the board and void the resolution if there was another emergency or need that would arise. And so typically our auditor would take that resolution and he would put it in reserved funds in our AFR, in the AFR. Yes, in the AFR. And so that's how you would see that money, it might be sitting in the education fund, but it's really reserved for something else unless something more pressing was to happen. I don't know how else we would be able to identify that.
Okay.
But we are transparent, and that's why we come with the resolution to the Board of Education.
Right.
Yes.
It sounds like it's been thought through and there's not a current option, so if anybody else has an idea. But I'm just trying to
Yes.
ease the anxious comments of you're taking money away from our
Yes.
kids, this should be going to this,
Yes.
just to try to be proactive and head that off. And then my final question, so a majority of our cost is in the
Education
in
fund.
the education
Yes.
fund, right? And a lot of it is for salaries for
Yes.
our district.
Yes.
I wasn't able, and I believe it's because of when the houses left our system, to see what it looked like in terms of paying for administrators and that education cost for when we had houses versus where we are now.
Okay, if you want to find that, on our website, we have all of our AFRs there.
Okay, fabulous.
And so go back to the AFR, and then it'll have school supports. You remember what the function is there? Yeah, so go back to one of the older AFRs. They're all posted on the district website, and you could do comparisons. But you won't get, because raises happened since then.
No, yeah. It's multi-layered. I understand it's not going to be a one-to-one, but it'll at least give me some framework. Okay, thank you for that context. That's helpful.
I saw your hand, Ms. Fabian.
I'm going to pass on my question, and it's getting later, but to your point, there was a presentation put out when that move was made that did have those numbers. So I don't know if that might be found in board docs somewhere.
Do we know what year it was?
20.
We'll look for it and see if we can track it down, get the exact date, and get it to the board.
Okay, I appreciate it.
So, Mr. Riddle.
Yeah, the only thing I was wondering is if we could possibly, for the layman, if we were going to put anything on our website, we might use that last one that you had where the summary of expenditures, but explain to people what those are. Just if people wanted to look on the website and see how much does it cost us to run our district, and they saw salaries, they know that's everybody's salary, $147 million. But well, that's not actually true. It's 152 million if you look at the end, okay? But then employee benefits, and so people know what that is. That's IMRF and Social Security, and I'm not sure if that's insurance thrown in there as well. But and then purchase services. What does that mean? This is you'd put in parentheses what that is. What are purchase services? They're things that we're buying we're sending kids to special. Outsourcing kids, or we're having nurses come in, that we're buying services, and then supplies and materials, and what that is. Just a brief explanation so somebody could look at it and say, "Whoa, I see that our biggest expenses are our salaries." And obviously, some people may not realize that employee benefits. It's just a thought. I don't know if the other board members think that would be useful. Just a summary for a snapshot for the public to understand. Because when you get down to other objects, or even capital outlay, they may not know what that is. Or non-capitalized equipment. I'm not sure myself. What is non-capitalized equipment? Do you know what it is? So maybe just seems like most of us here don't know what non-capitalized equipment is. I think it's
I don't know,
it's
walkie-talkies, laptops.
Yes, low-cost things that don't meet
but we're
the
talking about
$500
$20 million.
threshold.
No, what is it? No, $3 million roughly for non-capitalized equipment. So. And then luckily, I don't know, termination benefits, there's zero there. I hope that, not sure what that's even, what that even
we
means.
don't budget for that,
But just a thought, putting it on our website in a summary fashion, and people would have a good idea, wow, this district spends a lot of money, and here's what it goes for. Because sometimes they do see in the paper that we spend $340 million, and they think, wow, where does that all go? It's all going to administration. It's not. Well, how much is going to our kids? So it's just a thought, just a suggestion. To put it on our website once it's approved.
I would say maybe that could be a takeaway as we roll out the FACE department, Mr. Riddle, is to kind of, like we talked about, how to read board docs, how do you read a budget. I think those are all things that are important as taxpayers that we are not taught in school, not even walking in public schools, right? And so it still would be a good opportunity to I think that glossary may take a little bit more time to do those definitions, but that may be one of the projects, superintendent, that we want to work with FACE to roll out with the parent universities or community universities.
Yeah, especially, board president too, especially with the fact that people see, you go around the schools now, 8 schools, and we see lots of stuff happening, dumpsters out there, equipment, new entrances, new security entrances, maybe showing how much was spent this year on some of the capital stuff.
Or having a map.
Or having a map, yeah.
$250 was spent at Greenwood or Glenwood, and like you have a picture of what it looked like. Because a lot of times too, I think the narrative is that capital improvements don't help our academic environment, and they do.
Sure they do.
Our students care about the classrooms that they're in. I got teachers already complaining about what their classroom looks like, and that matters.
Sure does. And it looks nice. I noticed, at these schools we have the staircases have been replaced. They were cracking and stuff, and you've got a handicap, entrance coming in. So it looks nice. Our front entrances look nice right now.
Yeah, I don't have to hide my face when I drive through the Cook parking lot and fall into a.
Did you see the pictures?
Oh, it's so pretty. And so I know Mr.
Foreman
Alexakis is typically will do his, they won an award, so congratulations for that.
Absolutely.
And I like this Jeep, so he has a Jeep and everything now,
That's
so they
so
go
cute.
all
I
out.
loved it.
And I know the board, they're setting up a time like we did last year, Deputy Moten, so that'll be forthcoming for anybody who wants to tour some of the projects that were done. So we've been doing that since the pandemic, kind of just giving that opportunity at the start of the school year. And I will ask any board members that do have a social media to highlight and promote those things if you're comfortable with doing so. I know we had a meeting with State Rep Rita Mayfield, and one of the misconceptions from the community is all our money was being spent on the First Midwest Bank building, and that is not the case. We are still moving forward with tons of projects, right? We were able to show the state rep what we were spending our money and funds on, and she was excited and was able to share that with constituents. So I continue on my social media, my official one, is to make sure that people are seeing what is it? What's his name?
Foreman Frankie.
Foreman Frankie. I knew that. I know.
Just kidding.
So I see in Foreman Frankie's post and highlighting right there, every building is being touched, right? How much are we spending at the buildings, different things that we're doing, safety. So I know that'll be forthcoming. And I, again, want to give kudos to the administration, finance department, everybody who's involved. And it is something that we can be proud of. I know there are bigger projects that we want to do. Our students are trying to, they're talking referendums, but part of how you get support with referendums is when you're transparent and you can show budgets, right? Even when we got the 240, I got excited, Ms. Polk, but then I said, dang, that's line item 192, where we ran out of money, right?
It's already
there. So I was like, man, I'm not saying that I'm not going to ask for some of it, but I am saying that it's already there if we know what the next priority is. And I think that is a testament to the work of the district, right? And what all of you all have done. So with that, I would like to call for a motion to adjourn.
I motion.
Motion by Ms. Gonzalez, second by Ms. Fabian. All in favor signify with aye. Aye. Any opposed? You can stay. Meeting is adjourned.